Oh, boom. Just like that, we're live. Energy Week podcast, Energy Week show. Ryan right here alongside the good doctor herself, Dr. Ellen Wald. Miss Wald, how are you doing this hot day in Texas?
Hot in Texas. It's hot here too. It's summer. It's what do they call them? The lazy days of summer,
Mhm.
the I don't
The
remember.
dog days? Are we
The
the
dog
dog
days.
days?
Is it the dog days of summer? I think that's supposed to be like late summer. I don't know.
I don't
Anyway, summer is in full swing. So is gasoline demand.
know. Yeah. Yeah. Gasoline demand is in full swing. Let's see here. Try to tweet out the link, and if I can get that done, there we go. Okay. U.S. Yeah, let's get into it. U.S. refineries week. Okay. I'm dead. U.S. refineries a week of strong gasoline demand with caution. Okay, so let's break that down. Okay, week of strong.
Yes.
Okay, is
Week
the
as in
yes,
the length of time. As
yes,
in 7 days.
yes. Editor never wrote the headline aloud. Should U.S. The first question from this is on the Financial Post, but it's via Bloomberg. Should U.S. refiners get excited about 1 week of record demand for gasoline? Miss Wald, should they?
Should they? I'm not sure if the refiners should ever get excited. I mean, they are gasoline refiners. Like, what happens when you combine excitement with like catalytic cracking?
Mhm,
Could be
mhm,
dangerous
mhm,
if they
mhm.
really get excited.
Yeah, keep it tempered.
Yeah, yeah. Don't hype the crackers into full, overdrive. Um,
But but I mean, we do have this is from Patrick DeHaan from Gas Buddy. Yeah, we haven't had Patrick on in a while. Maybe we should reach out to him. But according to Gas Buddy data, weekly U.S. gasoline demand Sunday through Saturday fell 3.4% from the prior week, or 0.4% from the 4 week average. But if you go back to a week ago, they had was it the largest? I'm trying to think what they reported 7 days ago, like the largest demand in like a
yeah,
year, like 2 years or something crazy like that.
yeah. So it's kind of interesting because so gasoline demand like last week was the July 4th week, and
Mhm,
now it was like a huge demand. Lots of
mhm,
travel, lots of everything. Everyone's going somewhere, I guess.
mhm,
Um, So, I mean, even in the article, it says that's the July 4th is the first of the season's two big driving holidays. I guess Labor Day would be the second. Yeah. So, although this year Labor Day is the first full week in September, so I guess it's a little later than typical. But so you're saying that so we're measuring gasoline demand during basically like the absolute best week that you're going to get, and it was up 9.5%, more than 10 million barrels per day, which is a high in terms of like a surge, but it's still, so the question is this reflecting like a return to pre-pandemic 2019 levels, or is this just like a huge jump? And like, was that the height? Basically, like, was that the highest we're going to see gasoline demand this summer? And is it going to come down now? And so I think Patrick's data is kind of indicating that perhaps, he's looking at the week, after that, he's saying
mhm,
like, yeah, it was down, we'd expect it to be down. And this is kind of a question that I think is occupying a lot of people is, can we expect gasoline demand to stay really strong and like finish the summer really strong, or is it kind of downhill from here? And then what are we going to see post Labor Day? Because typically gasoline demand goes down when September's that's also like refineries start to do the maintenance and they switch over and all of that stuff, because there's a kind of down period in gasoline demand. Um, but so typically you'd expect that because that's the typical seasonal pattern. But the big issue is there are a lot of people who expect that September is going to be the big, like, okay, everybody, let's get back to work, let's go back to the office and back to
mhm.
school, and that so commuting is actually going to be up. So this is like seems like this is the big question preoccupying people when it comes to gasoline demand right now. So what do you think?
Yeah. Well, so the unemployment benefits run out in September, right? Or end of August, somewhere in
I
there.
think it depends on your state,
Okay, but
but
there's a talk about ending them. I believe August, September, basically nationwide for the extra coronavirus stuff. Um, and then you have seen kind of the big Fortune 100, 500 companies talk about Are they going to let people work from home? Which, let me just say, last year when you were telling everybody that you could work from wherever and people moved 2, 3, 4, 5 hours away, and now to be like, well, yeah, sorry about that. Maybe you shouldn't have jumped the gun so quickly. Um, the college thing is going to be interesting. So, how many people want to go back to college, or did they learn that they did better with the online classes? They don't need to go to college. Maybe they're a better student online. They're not tempted by the party and they get their grades done. you know, versus how many are like, dude, we missed out on a year partying. We got to go back. So I'm not sure you're muted there.
Yeah, so I think it depends. I think it may depend on like the university's like regime because some universities were like draconian. Like I've
Oh yeah.
like it sounds like horror stories. Like you couldn't leave your dorm, you had to reserve like a place at the library if you wanted to study. All your classes were online anyway, and you have to wear a mask every time, like literally every time you leave your dorm room. I mean, those are like extremely now there's some areas that where it's not. Like I think a lot of the southern schools are not like that. But like a lot of them might be. So I think it will vary depending on like what the like I mean, would you want to go to college if you're basically just gonna sit in your dorm room and take classes online? I mean, what's the point? I'd rather, have my parents at least make me food, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I think, now 18 to 21-year-olds are not exactly the most wisest demographic we have in the US, but I do wonder if there will be some that sit back and go, I really didn't need to be in the classroom. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm just, I suppose if you're like in medical, like a doctor or a nurse or something like that, obviously you want to be there interacting with people. Maybe like a law school, obviously, engineering stuff like get me hands on. We got a lot of labs, but I don't know how many majors you will need to be there, but we'll see. The other thing is sporting events will be fully back open. Football, especially in the South, right? So
Oh yeah. Well, some of that stuff
SEC
was already open, but
so,
yeah,
well, it wasn't fully open
that's true.
by last year during the pandemic, and so if you missed out seeing Alabama or Texas or whoever, Florida State, this is your chance. So, will you see kind of a spike in demand for people who missed their college
Mm.
football or NFL football games last year? When I say spike, it's a relative spike, but will you see people go to those events this year, and that will impact the number some?
Yeah, I mean, I think that considering like, I mean, if you look at this, if you look like Milwaukee, the arena is packed for the NBA final. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of demand for these things. I think there's some people who are not going to be interested, but I think there are plenty of people who are interested who will fill the spots of people who are like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not going to enter a crowded stadium. In terms of demand, I think it will help. I wonder though if finally by the time we get maybe to September, we'll be able to see what the real impact, like what is like what's actually going on with jet fuel. Is it is it is like, for example, are these like mask mandates on airplanes, assuming they're continued, or maybe they might be discontinued in September, who knows, but say they're continued, is that actually deterring people from flying, or is the lag because of the economy, because people are just concerned about flying no matter what, or lack of business travel? And I think that will be kind of interesting to be able to pick apart.
Yeah, that's a good point because it's really hard to tell. I don't want to fly unless I have to fly. And I flew last year for the little road trip I did up to the election a couple times, and they were the flight attendants were kind of moderate. Some of them were like, oh, you've got a drink in your hand, leave your mask off. No one cares. Some of them were like, you got a drink in your hand, you've had it for 5 minutes, put the mask back on. It's been a while, but you read the headlines, it's like, God, do I want to get on a plane? Because it sounds like they've kind of cracked down on some of that now. Like, if you're not eating, basically, you don't have a drink, then in your hand, then between sips even. So that's a deterrent. Just thinking about just going and doing all that. At least for me, I don't have anywhere. I
Yeah.
don't have where I have to go either. But if I had to go somewhere, I would go. I'd do the mask. So now that's not the same as we talked about international travel. If I got to like go to South Africa, you're talking about. I don't know if I can go to Atlanta anymore, but it's a 16-hour flight, 16 hours with a mask on. That is a long, long, long way to go, and I mean, they really gotta want me to come down there to do that. Really, really gotta want me to do that.
Yeah, I think we'll really get to see some of that. Here's a comment. Someone says that transatlantic flights should start picking up soon. European flights will pick up end of July because most of the restrictions are starting to drop. UK being first. I was actually wondering about that.
Mhm,
So when they drop the restrictions, is there going to be like a massive surge? Everyone's like, "Oh my God, get me out of here,"
mhm,
or is it going to be more tentative? Because it's really hard to gauge. I mean, you look at like the crowds from the soccer tournament and you're like, wow, nobody cares, it's done. But then you see people who are like, no, you can't lift the restrictions, you can't lift the restrictions. I really, you never know like what's the majority, what's not. And it'll be interesting to see. And that comment came from a listener in Portugal, where I believe I understand like people were that like Portugal's been more open, and I know there were people from like the Middle East who would go to Portugal and like hang out for like a week or 10 days and then go to England because Portugal was on like the list of allowed countries to England. I don't know, all sorts of interesting things. But I think another question is, will the fact that like people haven't been traveling up until say mid-July, will that lead to kind of like an extended summer season, if you want to call it that? Like, so, in the US, I mean, half of the country is starting school basically in August. So
right.
in like a couple weeks, half the country's going back to school, and then the other half is going to go back in September. But in Europe, it maybe are things going to be like extended a little bit? I wonder. It'll be interesting to see how the seasonal patterns change.
Well, and the Europeans get like what, like 6 weeks off for vacation every year. So, if they've been rolling over that vacation from last year, they may wanna go on extended, extended vacations. You know, for every company that we hear that says, you have to come back to work, there are a lot of companies who we will never hear of, small businesses or medium businesses who figured out how to work without having to travel to foreign countries. And so that's kind of that thing we're talking about. It's kind of hard to measure exactly what will happen because I know of a gentleman, and he told me that he used to go to London. Was it once a quarter? I think it was, and now he's gonna go once a year. CEO of a company, he's gonna
Yeah.
go once a year. I think what it was, or maybe it was once a month. Maybe it was once a month, and now he's going once a quarter, or whatever it was. He cut it, down pretty dramatically. That's just one guy, one business.
But how many of those, and then
How many of
adds
those
up?
are out there, right? Because that's just the way it is.
It's really hard to it's really hard to say, and until you see the numbers. I think there was a really interesting chart that someone shared. It's really easy to look up the TSA numbers. They like publish them every week of how many passengers they screen. So I'll try to include it in the show notes, but it's basically it had 2019, 2020, and 2021, and so far. And so if you're looking at where 2021 is, it basically like the week of July 4th, which was like the most, it like just hit. It was like because it looked like it was the height of 2021, hit like just where almost where it was in 2019. And that's like the busiest day. So I don't think we're hitting 2019 levels. But it's interesting. You know what? Another interesting thing was that I meant to include this in the articles, but I didn't. Is this news that the EU is going to enact a new tax on passenger planes, but not private jets
Yes,
and not
private jet.
cargo jets.
Yes, I saw that. I saw that. Yes, private jets and cargo jets. And I didn't break down. I don't know how the EU classifies cargo jets, but if you go to like was it Flight Radar or whoever that tracks the flights,
Yeah,
the amount of cargo that's shipped, and as far as total jet fuel consumption, is pretty substantial. It's not like a very small. It's like a irrelevant portion. The private's obviously insignificant, but the cargoes are pretty huge. And so the people who are stuck paying it are the
yeah,
average Joe getting on the plane, going to pay the
yeah.
tax. If you got a private jet, then guess what?
I,
You're exempt because reasons.
I mean, it's like I mean, could you be more obvious? You don't want the common man or woman or whatever to fly.
Yeah.
You've determined that they are somehow, I don't want to say like they're the source of all the carbon from flying, because they're clearly not. Like, people, like, they
Mhm.
pack you into those jets like no other, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
obviously they're not, but like it's clear that they've decided that they're expendable, like that the common people should not be flying because climate change, but all the fancy upper class people, like super upper class people,
Mhm.
can fly their private jets with, I mean, like, why would you not tax private jets? Come on. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I can see the cargo stuff maybe if you want, because like it could inhibit trade, which trade's already kind of messed up because of all those tariffs. But like, come on. I mean, the look on, like, that looks so bad. Like, you really cannot look worse.
That policy is brought to you by Bill Gates, by the way. In case you're wondering.
Yeah. Bill
Um,
Gates and the WEF.
yeah, I've got his book right here, Gates, and I love it. He says it's early on. So, have you read his new book? I'll
I
have
have
to.
not. I put it on my, like, borrow list from the library, but I had other things I was more interested in reading.
Oh, it's a doozy because he explains to you. I'm pretty sure in the introduction, why it's okay for him to um, fly private because um, I'm also
Because,
investing in zero carbon technologies.
oh
Here,
god, that is the
here's
worst.
the quote. I'm aware that I'm an imperfect messenger on climate change. The world is not exactly lacking in rich men with big ideas about what other people should do or who technology could fix problems.
Wait,
And
is that his, like, is he, like, examining his privilege here?
yeah, oh, he
You
goes
know,
on.
where you're supposed to,
Yeah,
like, state your privilege or whatever?
and I own big houses, not house, and fly in private planes. In fact, I took one to Paris for the climate conference. So who am I to lecture anyone on the environment?
Well,
Then he
then
goes on
why
to
don't you just
explain to
close
you,
the book now?
like, what do I need to keep reading?
Okay, that's like the number one thing that they teach you when, like, creating an argument. Like, I remember they're like, don't undercut yourself before you've actually made your argument.
Yeah.
Like, don't pick apart the weaknesses in your argument before you've actually made it.
Don't worry. He explains to you how he's been buying offset carbon credits and carbon. He's investing in carbon technology. And anyways,
Oh,
this
I
is
hate that. Give
oh
me a
gosh,
break.
I know.
Like, that there's still carbon in the atmosphere. You can invest in offsets, but that doesn't actually, like, on your paper it changes, but like, does the atmosphere care? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
All
Okay,
right.
let's talk about the energy transition. Speaking of hypocrisy, Biden's quest for cheap gasoline tests his climate goals. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The question is, does he really have a quest for cheap gasoline? So I read this article and I was like, "Ooh, that's interesting." And then you read the article and you're like, I mean, does Biden really want gasoline prices lower? I mean, think back to, like, what was it, 2018, summer of 2018, right around now, gasoline prices were climbing and Trump was tweeting, OPEC, get your act together and, you know, pump more oil, or
Right,
whatever it was he was tweeting that made
right.
the news. And Biden is like, well, we, what did they say? It said he weighed in on faltering OPEC negotiations over the weekend, calling for the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia to come to terms over production quotas. Now, first of all, Saudi Arabia and the UAE didn't really have, like, they both, like, they all agreed to, in the raising production, like, department, they all, like, everyone is in agreement to raise production by 400,000 barrels a day in August. So that wasn't actually the issue. The issue was, are they going to extend the production cuts? So I don't know. It just seemed like that was a very, like, please do this.
Well, the other
Okay,
thing is
I made
Biden.
my point.
But Biden stands towards the Saudis, whether you agree or not. Has this been just about the goal? But his attitude towards the Saudis has been a lot harder than Trump's was. Trump was pretty much friendly. Remember the picture of him and the orb?
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, Biden comes in and comes after the whole. Oh, who's the journalist they killed?
Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah, I mean, like that's like week one. They're releasing that stuff, and so
Yeah, but nobody cares anymore. And he didn't actually do anything. Like, they didn't, like, cut off, anything.
well,
I think it,
they stopped funding the war in Yemen.
Yemen. Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. I just my read on it is
Hmm.
Biden isn't as friendly with the Saudis as Trump was. Whether you think we should be or not. It's up to
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
you.
I don't think Trump was quite as friendly as people think. I mean, I don't know.
Well, okay, true. He did start funding the Yemen stuff again, but he would call them out. But okay, let me say like this. Yeah, when you're on good side of Trump, Trump's like you're the greatest. They're the
Yeah.
greatest. They're all so lovely, and all this stuff, and so they're not getting that from Biden. And Biden, the
Yeah.
release has been a little bit. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. No, no. Okay, this is a really good point from a listener. He says, I miss Trump rallies where he says, King, I called to King, pump more oil. So
Mhm.
that's a really good point because that was one of the things people were like, oh, he's really good friends with like MBS and all that. And one of the points that Trump always made was he was like, I called the king. He
Mhm.
was always talking about how he took to King Solomon, which in a way was like kind of like putting MBS in his place. So I think that was actually a really important distinction that he made in his relationship with Saudi Arabia was this like I talked to the guy up top, not like the next in line.
Not number
So
two. Yeah.
yeah, so I think that was important. And then there was like, so there was that, and then remember there was that whole time with like in the Oval Office when MBS comes in, and I mean at least the way I read that situation where he's like had those like posters, and he's like, "Hey, Crown Prince, here's all the money you spend in my country buying my stuff."
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, like, come on, if that wasn't like a way of being
That's true.
like that was, but anyway, it's
That's true.
kind of like I just think that like I don't think Biden's like really all that concerned about gasoline prices right now. Is
Well, okay,
basically
yeah,
my
okay.
point.
So, okay, I think you're right. And here, so the Saudi issue aside, higher gasoline prices and higher oil prices makes renewables more competitive or even cheaper option. And so when oil was 100 a few years back, everybody talked about how renewables they're so cheap now compared to oil. So him getting high gas or high oil prices works to the renewable argument as well.
Right, and that would go to the argument of like it's not really testing his climate goals because he's paying lip service to trying to bring gasoline prices down, not actually doing anything, and basically like saying whatever guys you got to pay or not. I mean, some of this I do think is due to inflation. So and like
Mhm.
his monetary policies are super pro inflation, which we're going to talk about later anyway. But but yeah, I mean, so people like it says in this article, analysts said his entrance into OPEC's negotiations potentially demonstrates the limits of Biden's climate agenda. I just don't think that he really, I mean, maybe he did, and there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that we don't know about, but it just didn't seem to me like he was really doing all that much to get into OPEC's negotiations. I mean, look what Trump did when OPEC fell apart, in 2020, and he was like calling them all and being like, get your act together, guys, and like,
Okay,
cut
okay,
production. So I just don't. I'm not
I agree.
buying it that like
I
Biden has
agree.
actually entered into OPEC negotiations. He said his piece and
Yeah.
like,
So I agree, and I suspect that you're right. However, uh, I'll defend Joe here for half a second. I saw a video today where it was where Obama announcing the killing of Bin Laden, and then it was like 2 seconds of that, and like 2 seconds of Trump announcing the killing of some terrorists. And oh man, you've got Obama like tonight, Navy SEALs raided, and then Trump's like, we killed him like a dog. He died like a dog. you know, and I was like, we have kind of forgotten what normal presidential diplomacy looks like. So
that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, okay.
I'm not saying Biden did anything. It would just be look a little different, probably.
You're saying that I've gotten so used to like rule by tweet
Yeah,
that yeah.
we all
Okay.
have. We all have.
Yeah. All right, that's a good point. I will give him the benefit of the doubt.
I think.
Although his efforts don't seem to have amounted to all that much.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying that he actually did anything. just I just saw that video. I don't know if I can find it again, but it was so funny because I'm kind of like you, like, man, what's going on here? Then you watch that, you're like, okay, yeah, we killed him like a dog. It's just so, oh gosh. So I don't know if I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I liked it or anything, but
Okay.
so
No, that's a fair point. I
it could
think
be
I
that.
think we I will say I think we need to see how this energy and climate policy evolves. Clearly we're still in some kind of holding pattern. And Let's see.
Okay, all right. Let's talk about inflation. As you mentioned, per the Wall Street Journal, higher inflation is here to stay for years. Economists forecast. Just to be clear, tip of the cap to Mark Rossano, who was writing about this way back in last year, and so was writing about it pretty
Yeah.
extensively. So go ahead, Ms.
Well,
Warren.
so I was when I was reading this, I made a couple notes, and I was remembering back to last year when everyone was like, all of this economic stimulus, like, what about inflation? And they were like, don't worry, don't worry. If anything, if there's any inflation, it'll be transient. Now they're like, there's inflation. It's what are they saying it is now? Jumped to 3.4%. The core
Mhm.
price index of personal consumption expenditures, which we all know is not actually a real measure of inflation because it doesn't include like a lot of basic necessities,
Right.
jumped to 3.4% in May, which is the biggest increase since the early 90s. And now they're saying it's going to be around for years. So, yeah, bully if you believe the people who said, inflation, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I thought Big Oren, we'll give him his shout out of the episode. He had a fantastic point, I don't know, a few weeks ago. They were showing the chart of lumber prices and how, it was going up and then it turned over. And Big Oren's like, it's so great we grew all those trees last year, because, and so you do have some stuff like that will reset. That was, um,
Yeah, I'm still waiting to redo my wood fence.
right, right. So the lumber prices aren't back, but they are, at least last time I looked at the chart, they are coming back down. And so it goes to show that we didn't necessarily have a shortage of trees or ability to harvest trees. The constraint was somewhere else. So
Yeah.
that could reset. You would expect that the housing boom to kind of slow down as well. So some of that stuff I think will come back. But as long as gasoline prices and oil prices stay high, then you kind of have inflation baked into everything else, right? Regardless
Well,
of what lumber wants to do, is going to be somewhat inflated by that alone.
yeah. It says here, it says so the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, which includes food and energy. So I think that's a much better gauge of inflation, rose 3.9%. So if you add in energy and food, it's up even more, which is nearly double the central bank's 2% target. Of course, the Fed keeps maintaining that inflation is picked up due to, it says, bottlenecks, hiring difficulties, and other, quote, largely transitory factors related to the economy's rebound from the effects of the pandemic. So they're claiming prices are up because things are bottlenecked and no one can hire anyone because there's no one will go to work. And I don't know what other transitory factors are, but I'm sure there are some.
Yeah.
So I would love to see it like a debate between like Mark, who's been saying this, and like someone who takes the Fed's position. I'd love to like, okay, is inflation just due to these things, or are we seeing like real inflation?
So on the numbers you quoted, those were excluding energy, right? But they're not. That you said.
No, so the first one, the 3.4%, was excluding food and energy. If you add in food and energy, it's 3.9, so it's almost
Right.
4%.
What I'm arguing is that if oil prices are if oil is $150 a barrel, whether you include that price as your inflation price or not, that actually impacts all of the other prices that you're gauging. So if
Yes,
oil drops to
exactly.
40, so you could have a supply constraint somewhere, but the price of oil is going to exacerbate the problem potentially. So um, the other thing is, I've been talking to someone about getting into the cattle business here in Texas because that's what we do, and he's been explaining to me the processing plants and how they work and all this stuff, and how many of them have closed over the past handful of years, and how hard it is to get your cattle sent to slaughter. And so, if you don't have for a small ranch like I'd be dealing with, if you don't have a spot reserved, you might not be able to get into a processing plant until the end of 2022. Yes,
What
end
are
of,
you supposed to, and then you have to feed the cattle the whole time, and that's
that's right.
expensive.
That's right. So, yeah, and so he said that a lot of them had closed before COVID, and he was kind of explaining some of that stuff. So that's a problem that's not necessarily going to be resolved overnight. There's no easy solutions because you got to get if you want to be USDA or whatever it is certified. There's steps, so it's not it's something that's this is not easy, and also you got to have what a butcher and people that run these things, and so anyways, that's just an interesting kind of
Yeah.
um, because you hear about beef prices and stuff so high, and he's like, it's not really us. We've got the cattle. There's just no one to processes the meat. So
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah,
Interesting.
there you go. Okay, OPEC Plus yet to make progress in resolving impasse. Sources say this is from 4 hours ago. OPEC Plus is yet to make progress closing divisions between the Saudis and the UAE.
I
That
don't
last,
think they've made any progress in the last 4 hours. So I
yeah,
think that's,
yeah, they're still there.
it seems like, do they really want, are they trying to make progress? Do they care? To me, it seems like they've basically accepted that like this is what's going to happen. Like there isn't going to be a production increase in August, or at least not one that is agreed upon. There may be some kind of like, oh, oops, we produced more, but it's interesting because if you look at, so Aramco and a lot of other companies, they'll issue their official selling prices the month before. So typically OPEC tries to have its meeting right before they want to issue their selling prices for the next month, which makes sense. But the meeting didn't happen. They never reached an agreement. So they issued their selling prices and they increased the prices to Asia. And then there was just, I think, news today that said that Aramco is filling all of its contractual obligations for oil to Asia, but they're not filling like requests for extra barrels. So I wonder, like, if that means that they are actually kind of increasing their exports a bit or not? Um, but I also wonder, like, is OPEC even going to bother trying to meet before September, or are they not going to meet in September? Even basically, we don't know.
A comment here: we need to notice that Henry Hub natural gas creeping up to 4 as well, in fall and winter season is ahead of us.
That's a good point. And actually, one of the other pieces on the BP world, like, or what is this, statistical review, actually mentions some interesting stuff about natural gas. So we're gonna talk about that. But I mean, what do you think? Do you think OPEC is going to get its act together, or are we kind of just like not?
Yeah, I think if okay, OPEC monthly meetings have been great. They're having a little kerfuffle, but the U.S. hasn't put any pressure on them to make them get their act together, right?
No, no.
So
I mean, unless there's some mysterious pressure that
sure,
Biden is working on that
I'm
we
talking
don't know
about
about.
yeah, well, okay, that, but also just the U.S. Frackers aren't. It's not like the rigs are just
Ah,
pouring out there, so it's not So unless you start seeing headlines, banks flock to Permian to give out cash, you know, I think that they're okay. I think that they're okay. They've kind of got themselves in a good spot right now.
that would be hilarious. We need some like manufactured article, like like banks rushing to
Yeah,
the Permian,
thanks rushing to.
bags of cash carrying.
Well, I got to ask you this real quick. We talked about this on a show last week. Hey, did you see the story about the Saudis launching their own media organization?
I did. I did.
If the Saudis want to pay us, I'm open. I don't know about Dr. Wald. I'm open. I've already said that publicly. I'm open to be paid by the Saudis. Um, so just
Careful what you wish for. You
point.
never know who's listening.
Well, that's a good point. But no, it's just funny because if you could write that headline and probably get some traction on it. But do you think that the Saudis will use that to try to influence U.S. frackers and what's happening?
I think they'll use it. Okay, I think if they're smart, they would. I'm not sure they'll be successful in that. I think they're probably focused mostly on DC stuff. But yeah, if they're smart, they should totally use it to try to do that.
And it's in OPEC's best interest to get their act together. We have seen good results when they're together. Anas had a tweet from someone saying that when the prices are high, OPEC struggles to work together. There's some kind of saying. Did you see that?
No.
I don't remember if I got it. I've got it
I,
somewhere.
I mean, I think that when OPEC is working well together, prices are more stable.
Mhm.
And I think they're less stable. So like that's why we're seeing some, fluctuation based on like the EIA report. Whereas when OPEC is basically kind of pretty clear about what it's doing and everyone's working together, we don't see as much fluctuation based on other things. So, I mean, I think it's in OPEC's interest to get its act together because it has more influence as a group. But I think, I mean, I think they have to deal with this issue of like, is this production agreement a forever deal or not. And the UAE is kind of pushing that before I think the rest of them really want to deal with it. But who's to say that maybe it's better if they just bite the bullet and deal with the issue now, as opposed to like halfway through 2022 or at the end of 2022. Deal with it now. Like I'm not saying I know what the right decision is, or the right way to go, but if they are really a group that's looking out for the stability of the oil market, they need to do something to encourage more investment in oil assets. And I'm not exactly sure what that is, but it may be something that they want to consider. They may want to actually think more about the long term than they are thinking right now.
Okay, and I have a injured child in the other room, so if it's loud, apologies. She was sitting there crying and stuff, trying to figure out what's going on. So she's good, I think. Hurt, but anyways, yeah, okay. Let's see here. You mentioned the BP
Should we
thing.
do
Let's
the BP?
go ahead and go do that next. Yeah. So, this is
Remember,
from.
was it last year's BP thing? Some sort of like, it was like some sort of bombshell, like here's our. It was. I just remember it was something very controversial.
They had some models in which they basically predicted it's possible that we had hit peak demand.
Right.
They
That
didn't
was
not
it.
like I think they nuanced it where you could say they didn't actually. But if I remember,
Yeah.
just of it was. Yeah, can we just are those days over? Or are we still is that what Art's talking about on Twitter? Still, Art Berman, is he still talking about peak oil
Peak
demand?
demand. I don't remember. Maybe. But I thought it was interesting because I remember that was like the big thing to do. And now this year, like, what's the point? So apparently the big issue is like looking back at 2020 and like kind of unpacking what happened in 2020. It says that their point was to identify anything about the black swan scenario that was surprising. First of all, like, if it's a black swan scenario, doesn't it by definition have to be surprising because you
Yes,
never
yes,
anticipate that? But okay,
that's the point. Yes.
all right, we'll give them that. So apparently they realized their model was bad. The BP model has used reliably. The model BP has used reliably for more than 20 years to explain macro demand trends predicted a 2.5% in decline in energy consumption versus the 4.5% that BP concluded was the true figure. So,
They got it wrong.
gee, models are always wrong. I'm not going to go on a model rant. So some other interesting things. Apparently, year-over-year demand for jet fuel and kerosene dropped by 40%. Gasoline demand dipped by 13%. The other interesting thing, and this has to do with natural gas, they say natural gas markets demonstrated relative immunity, in part because gas became a lot cheaper, which spurred gas to power generation across the US and the European Union, which was kind of interesting. But also, another major factor was that people in lockdown zones were restricted on where they can go. So they transferred their electricity use from commercial buildings to homes. So global electricity demand only fell by 0.9%. So yeah, you open that refrigerator door like 50 times a day, your electricity bill's going up.
Yeah, it's funny how all that stuff you don't really think about all the little things that you do and just open the door to get the Amazon package and let the heat out or the cold air out, the heat in and all that
Yep.
stuff. You multiply that, compound it multiple times a day. Like one thing I've noticed over here where we're at, if you order from Amazon and you have 2 or 3 packages coming in a day, you might get 2 or 3 trucks coming by.
Oh
And
yeah.
so
You have to select there's a thing you can select on Amazon to like reduce the total number of like trips.
I'm not like Bill Gates. I'm not reducing my carbon footprint right now. So I'm sorry. I need it when I order it. That's so.
But I thought it was interesting. And but also another factor was China. That the reduction in natural gas demand was buoyed by China because China bucked the global trend and increased its consumption by 7%. So China to the rescue, apparently.
China seemed to rescue everything last year with with their purchases. They were big spenders in the down economy.
So what do we think is going to happen with natural gas this winter? Because like there's less, less natural gas being produced because there's less oil being produced, less associated natural gas. I mean, are we headed for like a banner year? Is natural gas going to be like crazy high this winter?
That's a good question. Let's see. We got a comment. Irrespective of oil demand peak or not, we had to continue drilling new wells because existing production rates will decline, and we need to replace them. Agreed with that 100%.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
But I would argue, I think Ellen would as well, is that we didn't hit peak demand, so which means we've even got to have more wells. So
Yeah, I don't think we've hit peak demand. Not close.
God, so
Maybe if the European Union just says, I'm sorry, but nobody can fly commercial airliners anymore, then maybe we'll
maybe
have like that. Yeah, but
I need to go look at the rig count to see where the rigs are at, because you would think now would be the time to. So if you are, can
I
you?
know it went up 2 on Friday.
Yes,
I'm
we're
not
not
sure
Friday.
where it is
Yeah.
actually, but I know that it increased by 2.
But if you're a drilling company, is now the best time in the world to say, "Hey, we're going to drill for natural gas because we're not going to put it, we're not going to flare it. Like we're going to actually, take it and use it for something else. We're not going to flare it off like those people out in Texas and that are when they're drilling for oil, they're just flaring it off and try to make a pitch that you're actually being more responsible. Is there an ESG pitch in there or something if you're a natural gas only
There's an
like
ESG pitch in everything. You give me something, I could turn it into an ESG pitch.
well, maybe that's what you have to do because you think like the Haynesville or with the Marcellus or somewhere like that where there's a lot of dry gas. Now would be the time to drill those wells.
It'll be interesting. I think it'll be interesting. I think also though we'll hear about it in the winter more because like the places that use like natural gas heating tend to be the ones that get focused on, as in like the Northeast. Like something happens in New York, like everybody has to hear about it, like ad nauseum. So if natural gas prices are high and people are paying more, like in that region, the whole country's going to hear about it, even if like in the Midwest it's not so bad or elsewhere. Um, so I think it'll be interesting.
Oh well, we'll have to do our yearly story on Boston's failing power infrastructure.
Yeah.
What's going on with those guys? It feels like we cover that one every year. Okay,
Yeah.
let's see here. The last one. I think we have time for. Yeah, big oil keeps brakes on spending even when crude rally windfall. Yeah, yeah. Big oil is not really laying the hammer to
Not
big
drilling.
oil. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they claim that. Okay, at what point are they going to stop rebuilding their balance sheets? Like really, like okay, how long are they going to rebuild their balance sheets for? Because it says the international oil companies are still rebuilding their balance sheets. Says Brian Gilvery, CEO of INEOS Oil and Gas Division, INEOS Energy, and former BP Chief Financial Officer. Okay, but like how they've been doing it for months. Like how long? When
Hmm.
when when are they going to be like, okay, we're flush with cash and we're looking for stuff? Like when are they going to be like, you know, oil and gas assets, pitch us?
Well, I mean, it's BP says
BP.
it's
Well,
still,
I don't. Yeah, I don't
it'll
think BP and Shell.
40% by 2030.
Yeah, I don't know, but at
That
some
has to
point,
pick it with somebody, right?
yeah. I mean, at some point, someone's going to have to do something. Like, are they just going to like sit on mountains of cash and return it to shareholders? Maybe, but like at some point, like someone's going to want to drill.
You would think.
Otherwise, yeah. Otherwise, like I said in this otherwise you're going to have all the new stuff being done by the NOCs, and you really want your oil coming from Rosneft and ADNOC.
Okay. Speaking. Okay, I have to go back. Okay, I will try to put a clip from inside the war room because I had someone on and he said that the Russians Okay, let me find the clip and put it at the end of the podcast, so you can go listen to that at the end of this podcast because I don't want to misquote him and make sure he did tell me that on the podcast because it's an interesting story about the Russians and the Germans and what's all going on there. But who is our oil company over there that says that we're an oil company? We don't care. Who is that? I never can remember. Is it is it ADNOC? No. Who is
Could be
the one that
Aramco.
no, it's the one like 3 months ago.
Oh, was it? It was.
Like yeah,
Oh, I remember. Yeah, they're like, we're
we're
an
an
oil
oil
company.
company.
We're an oil company.
We're an oil company. That's
Yeah,
what we do.
yeah, that's what
Let's
we
go
do.
rule the
We do
world.
oil. We do oil. We don't do. We don't do wind or solar. Was it Chevron or Exxon? I think
No,
it was.
it was one of those Middle Eastern state-owned companies. I had to, God, I can't. I should
I
have
think it was
like.
Aramco.
No, I tell you, what's it around? Okay, Aramco might say it, may say that too, but this was one of the smaller ones.
Oh, like
Um,
Kuwait? No,
no, I don't care. We'll have to go back find it, but because we
could
were
have
like,
been ADNOC.
yeah, I think maybe it was ADNOC. I think that's who it was. Who's ADNOC
That's
Central?
Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, I think that was it. I think it was ADNOC. That's like, yeah, we're an old company. That's what we do. We don't, whatever. Yeah. I think it was ADNOC. Okay, but anyways, um, he said this. Aramco CEO said that. Yeah, but maybe I'm not saying Aramco didn't say it. I'm saying the context of the show. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure we had a story where ADNOC was kind of like thumping their chest, like, yeah, we're gonna do oil, baby. That's all we do. Kind of had that West Texas feel to it. So we can appreciate that. So all
yeah.
right, Dr. Wald, where will you be this week?
This week I will be on investing.com, and that's it. Yeah, yeah, that's it. Slow week,
Slow week.
unless something happens. You never know.
Well, something's likely to happen. That's just it's
Yeah,
20.
hopefully it's not like the ocean lights on fire or a container ship gets stuck in some, waterway.
Okay, yeah, and I will try to clip off part of that from Inside the War Room where he talks about the Germans and the Russians. If I can find it and put it at the end of this. But it's episode 30 something, 30, I think, of Inside the War Room. You can go check that out. All right, we'll be back next week.